Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Deltana, their part number SDL980. And, well, that's what the box looks like. And I have one removed here for us to review. And this is going to be possibly familiar with, or to you, I should say, because of its ubiquitous nature as it exists throughout time, really, in storm door applications and residential type applications. Very nice quality item. This would be a probably no coincidence that this part number matches a part number from Ives as their 980. Probably be no coincidence that this is the SDL Storm Door Latch 980. This is what it looks like in the polished brass finish, and is comprised of some different pieces here, and let's go through them one at a time. Let's do first a visual tour of everything. So let's rotate the lever off the threaded spindle. Sorry, I realize it's like paint drawing. Okay, so we've got that lever removed from there. It's all solid brass construction, which is of course going to afford a very high quality finish because it's an architectural base material is the point of that. Okay, so then we have our inside or interior rosette. That's going to feature a privacy function that can be engaged. Okay. Our latch bolt. We can depress the latch and slide that off, and that will, with a little bit of coaxing, slide off. And it's all spring loaded on the inside of there, which is why it reacts that way. You can see that spring down there. Okay. The exterior rosette. Then we have the exterior knob that's threaded onto the spindle, and we won't remove it. And you've got this funny shape to this spindle because it's inside of here is where the feature to the latch bolt is going to nest into it. That pointed area will sit into that recessed area, allowing you to basically to retract the latch bolt is how that works. Very nice quality brass material. Let's take some basic dimensional properties, and it is inherent in the fact that this is a 980 that it has a lever on the inside and a knob on the exterior. The diameter of the 980 knob is about 1.75 inches. It's going to have a total depth from the face of the rosette anyway of about 1.5 inches. When we add that rosette, it will obviously increase a little bit. Oh, that would explain it. I was about to put the wrong rosette on. Now let's judge what that total projection would be. And I like to give dimensions because it'll help clients determine if this is a good fit. About 2 inch on the overall projection, maybe a little heavy on that. Let's take a look at the outside diameter of the rose. About 1.7 inches. Okay. About 5/16. Moving down into the latch assembly, it's going to have a back set, and we're going to get into the installation instructions in a moment, of about 1.75 inches, but we're going to verify that based on the installation instructions in a moment. The interior rose with its privacy slide feature here. Same diameter. Then that interior lever. Not including the rose, its projection is going to be about 1.5 inches. It's going to have an overall length of about 2 1/4. And the one spare piece that you see here is the set screw that will be used on the interior to hold the interior lever on. Then we are looking at finally the strike plate, and that's solid brass as well. And then finally we have the screws that are going to be here. Let's take the dimensional properties of this strike. This is called a T-strike. You can use your imagination, 1 3/4 tall. Use your imagination and see why we would call it a T-strike. Overall width of about 1 3/8. Strikes, however, are really measured from the center line of the screw holes to the edge of the lip, and is just about 15/16. And then finally we have a bag of screws. Now, those screws are not magnetic. That tells us they're non-ferrous, and it would be a very reasonable conclusion to say that they're brass, because everything else is the exposed parts are brass. Be mindful of installing that material, because you don't want to strip the screws out because it's a softer material. Be sure to pre-drill the hole properly so as to not strip anything out. Now, let's take a look at the link to the installation instructions, which is called cut sheet, and they are included with the material as well. Page 2, and what we're looking at here is a very simple installation, and I've installed this material in the past, and basically what you're looking at is indeed just 2 holes. That hole that's going to the latch bolt hole, and then your crossbore hole. I would drill the hole through the door first, the crossbore, which is a 5/8 hole through the door, 1 3/4 in from the door edge. Then you'll drill your latch bolt hole, which is going to be, again, thankfully, 5/8, 2 3/4 deep. At the same center line, they say the level with the handle hole, the same vertical center line is what that would be. So now what you're talking about is top of the door to the center of the latch, something appropriate for your installation. Anywhere from maybe 34-inch to 43-inch. I would say something in the 36-inch range will start to begin typical height off the finished floor for a residential application. Something closer to about 40.5 would be common for a commercial application. You might audit the rest of the lock heights in the space or in the house or wherever this is and be compatible. However, because this is very likely going onto a storm door, you want to be very sure that you are not going to interfere with that interior lever to the face of something. So be mindful of that as well. Okay. Now, what you want to do is determine that proper height. Drill through the door, but first 1 3/4 from the door edge. This is probably not going to exist on your door, but wood doors can be square edge or beveled. Your door is probably square edge, but doesn't necessarily mean that it is. The 1 3/4 dimension from door edge, they don't say it, but that's to the center line of the hole, is called the back set. If you're going to measure 1 3/4 on a square edge door, it'll be 1 3/4 regardless of it being on the push side or the pull side. But if you were to measure that same dimension on a door that's beveled, you can use your mind. You can, in your mind's eye, think, when I hook my tape measure on the exterior of the door, assuming it swings out, I've got the high side of the door. So I have to be mindful so as to drill that 1 3/4 hole properly. But backset is defined not from the push side or the pull side, but it's actually defined from the center of the door, so that it actually, I'm going to make a quick sketch, so that it actually looks like from the center of the door like that. This being your 1 3/4 or 1 3/8 or 3/4 inch thick door. Just simply be mindful that that bevel, if it's a typical bevel, is 1/8 inch for every 2 inches in door thickness. We are certainly focusing on minutia, admittedly. The truth of the matter, however, is if you get a dimension that, why is my hole crooked or funny, or my drill bit isn't exactly through the door, and it's probably because of that you have a beveled edge door. What I would simply suggest doing is always do a reality check on the hardware, and we should be 1.75 inches from the underside of the head over here to the center of that hole, and that is indeed correct. That's where that spindle is going to go through. If you're working on a beveled edge door, simply compensate. Drill through the door and stop when your arbor bit starts to pierce through the other side, and be sure to drill straight. Then finish the hole from the opposite side, making a nice clean cut. That will ensure you that within tolerance you're going to be drilling straight. Plus, you know, if you're not going to inherently drill straight through the door, there'll be a small amount of deviation. And there's tolerance built in the lock to account for all of that. But simply be mindful if you're measuring from the edge of the door, if it's beveled, that you have to compensate for that bevel slightly. Drill through the door, then come with your crossbore, same center line. So let's say you're going to be at 36 inch or 40 inch. Hook the tape measure to the top of the door, come down, mark your center line on the face of the door, but on the edge of the door as well, since you're there. Then in the center of the thickness of the door is where the 5/8 hole, 2 3/4 deep, will go for the latch bolt. What I would then do at that point is I would simply insert my latch bolt into the hole with this in the proper orientation based on hand of the door. Do you want the latch this way or this way? Position it correctly. It doesn't matter. You can change it once it gets in the door. After you have this in the door, simply depress it so that you can take this assembly, well, almost there. Rosette has to go down first. You can take this assembly and push it through the door. Still doing it wrong. Okay, so I've got that nested there. So when I were to rotate the spindle, it will act to retract the latch. And I would leave all of this basically loose, is what I would do. I would then come with the interior rows, and I'd slide that on. They are basically, it doesn't matter which side you have the privacy pin on. I mean, I would be prone to keeping it away from the edge of the door, is where I would certainly put it. Then at that point you will thread your lever on. The issue with conducting the work this way is you're probably going to want to dry fit everything and then to determine exactly the positioning to make sure everything works. At that point I would rotate the knob and the lever off, then securing my rosettes to the face of the door, and then I would bring that material back on and I would center it so that it's installed, balanced and centered, and that set screw that I showed you earlier will go right in here. And I'll get it started in there and just leave it. Once you have all that work done, again pre-drilling everything, it's time to attach the strike. And most certainly that strike is intended to be surface mounted. If you wanted to try to chisel that out, you're certainly welcome to. It's my guess that that's about 30 thousandths of an inch thick, so it's probably not going to be even remotely permissible to mortise for this. It's .048, so very, very thin. It's about the thickness of a commercial kick plate, so you really wouldn't mortise for that. But I suppose you could, if you were really determined, skim that jam surface down a little bit to make that fit. They do not give any solid direction as to how that's going to work in terms of the placement of the strike, but you want the vertical center line to equal the vertical center line of the edge of the door where the latch is projecting from, and then simply compensate for the space between the face of the door and the face of the stop. You know, you're going to want to just mark it, make sure that it's in the right spot, and then apply it, is the bottom line. You will need to obviously drill a hole back behind here so deep. I would recommend using a flat bottomed bit like a Forstner bit so that you don't blast through the back of the jamb and expose the stud and the inner construction, wall construction. Something really nice and small would be really nice to make that work. You've got an inside width of about 3/8. Yeah, it's about 9/16, and then an inside height at about 3/4. So if it was me, I would be very likely tempted to. I might use a 5/8 bit, and I might drill a hole here and then another one here, or I would probably drill a 5/8 hole here, and then I would square out these corners by hand is probably what I would do. That wouldn't be such a drastic thing to have to do. At the end of the day, regarding Deltana, you're going to hopefully experience the same thing that I do, in the sense of having a high-quality piece of imported builder's hardware that is going to show up with very good fit and finish, that is going to be shipped by a company who has an exceptional track record when it comes to prompt, reliable, predictable shipping lead times, and by people who actually understand the product. Now, Deltana is an importer, and we've been working with them for several years. However, they actually possess product knowledge, so they are certainly more than just an importer of builder's hardware. And for that, I appreciate their expertise, because occasionally you do have to call the people you buy the hardware from for help on that sort of material. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Deltana products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Deltana SDP980 in polished brass or any of the finishes that it's available in, which are polished brass US 3, US 10B oil rubbed bronze, US 15 satin nickel, and US 19 black satin, like a matte black finish, or any other Deltana product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.